Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack the incredibly complex mechanics behind Spain's immigration detention network. But to truly wrap our heads around how this system operates on a day-to-day basis, we're going to look closely at a totally unprecedented moment in its history. A moment that basically forced this entire massive operation to grind to an absolute halt. It's a fascinating lens for us to examine the policies, the practices, and the real human impact of border control in one of Europe's biggest entry points. Okay, picture this. It's March 2020, and as the global pandemic rapidly took hold, dramatic protests erupted at the Alucia facility over in Madrid. The detainees there were deeply and understandably concerned about the immediate health risks of being locked in confined spaces where social distancing was literally impossible. But on top of that, border closures meant that all deportations were abruptly canceled, throwing everyone inside into this sudden, terrifying state of legal limbo.
And this unrest, it triggered a rapid chain of events that led to a truly staggering statistic. By May 6, 2020, the number of people held in Spain's mainland immigration detention centers plummeted to absolutely zero. Zero! For the very first time in the 3 decades since these facilities were created, the entire mainland system was emptied out. The detainees were released because, well, the legal justification for holding them just completely evaporated overnight.
Now you might be wondering, this immediate emptying out creates a really fascinating knowledge gap for us. We have to ask ourselves, what exactly are these centers? Who normally fills them? And how did a microscopic virus succeed in completely shutting down a massive state apparatus that human rights activists and local politicians had been intensely campaigning against for years?
Section 1. Inside Spain's detention system.
All right, to understand how the system emptied out, we first need to get a grip on what it's actually designed to do. The backbone of this network relies on facilities known as CIEs, or Foreigner Internment Centers. It is absolutely crucial to understand that under Spanish law, these are strictly administrative holding facilities. They are not prisons, and they are not designed to be punitive. Their sole legal purpose is to hold non-citizens temporarily just to guarantee their administrative deportation, whether that's for an immigration law violation or as a substitute for certain criminal convictions.
But right before the pandemic hit, this system was basically bursting at the seams. It was under immense, mounting pressure. Asylum requests had skyrocketed, literally more than doubling from just over 54,000 in 2018 to nearly 118,000 in 2019. See, Spain had become a huge entry point into Europe as other Mediterranean routes were restricted, and this massive influx placed an incredible logistical burden on border authorities and the entire detention network.
So how does an individual actually move through this maze? Well, the legal flow typically starts at the border or point of entry. A person can be held at a police station, but only for a maximum of 72 hours. If a return can't be executed in that short window, a judge has to issue an order for placement in a CIE. Once they're in a CIE, the maximum legal stay is a hard limit of 60 days, no exceptions. By the end of those 60 days, authorities must either successfully execute the deportation or the individual has to be released.
Section 2. Vulnerable groups in detention.
Now, understanding the legal blueprint is really only half the story. Monitoring groups frequently document a major disconnect between these rules on paper and the reality on the ground. For instance, by law, unaccompanied minors are supposed to be housed in specialized children's shelters, right? Not CIEs. The 2014 Framework Protocol clearly states that if a minor has official documents proving their age, they shouldn't be subjected to invasive medical age assessments. Yet, human rights bodies report that in practice, these medical assessments are routinely applied as a rule, completely regardless of any official paperwork. Because of these disputes over age determination, numerous children end up mistakenly placed right in adult detention facilities.
And we definitely have to talk about the massive geographical double standard going on here. While mainland facilities were emptied entirely during the COVID lockdowns, the situation was drastically different down in Spain's North African enclaves. The temporary migrant holding centers, known as CITES, in Ceuta and Melilla stayed open and became severely overcrowded. Observers were raising urgent alarms about the lack of protective measures and the dire conditions faced by the people held there, especially the detained children.
Section 3. The deportation disconnect.
Okay, remember earlier when we said the strict legal justification for these centers is just to guarantee deportation? Well, what happens when that doesn't actually work? Check out this data from 2018. Less than half, only 45.8% of the detainees held in these facilities were actually deported.
The majority, 54.2%, were eventually released right back onto Spanish streets, usually just because that maximum 60-day holding limit had expired without a successful removal.
So, the crucial takeaway here is that this remarkably low deportation rate fundamentally challenges the system's own stated purpose. It underscores some heavy criticism from academics, NGOs, and legal observers. They argue that because these facilities routinely house people who are essentially non-deportable, the CIE network effectively acts as an arbitrary form of punishment rather than a functional administrative tool for immigration control.
And as you might guess, maintaining this extensive, highly debated infrastructure comes at a massive cost to the taxpayer. Back in 2013, the annual upkeep of the CIE network was estimated at around 8.8 million euros by the National Mechanism for the Prevention of Torture. When you combine that huge price tag with the low deportation success rate we just talked about, it raises some really intense logistical and economic questions about the efficiency of this whole model.
Section 4. Pushing the borders outward.
To really get the full picture of Spain's strategy, we actually have to zoom out and look beyond its physical borders at a policy known as externalization. Over the years, Spain has actively sought to push its border controls outward into Africa. Like in 2006, Spain actually financed the creation of a detention center all the way in Mauritania to intercept migrants before they could even reach the Canary Islands. The approach definitely fluctuates, though. In 2018, Spain made global headlines by offering a safe harbor to the Aquarius rescue ship when other nations turned it away. But then, just a year later in 2019, the policy shifted again, focusing heavily on tasking the military police with sea rescues and relying much more on the Moroccan Coast Guard to intercept vessels before they ever reached Spanish waters.
Ultimately, those sudden releases prompted by COVID-19 proved something that critics had long argued was impossible. This vast, complex, and controversial system could be rapidly halted when public health and legal realities demanded it. It totally stripped away the idea that the system was some permanent, unchangeable fixture. And that leaves us with a really critical, lingering question. As global travel and migration routes inevitably normalize, will Spain simply return to the old status quo of crowded CIEs and low deportation rates? Or will this unprecedented pause actually catalyze a permanent shift in how the state manages its borders? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the systems around you, and we'll see you next time.